Arjun Mehra, a self-made millionaire, lived his life surrounded by business meetings, contracts, and endless hours at his corporate headquarters. Success was his obsession, and emotions had very little space in his carefully built world. Most nights, he returned home late, so late that he only managed a passing glance at his little boy, Ariv, before collapsing into bed. Ariv, just 5 years old, was a bright, beautiful child. Yet life had not been simple for him. He walked with the aid of crutches, learning step by step to face the world with courage. Arjun loved him dearly, but, buried in work and haunted by his own past losses, he rarely gave Ariv the time he deserved. That day was different. A crucial international meeting had been cancelled, and for the first time in months, Arjun drove home early. As he parked his black luxury car in front of his grand mansion, he felt the unusual stillness in the air. Normally, the household staff would be bustling about, but today, something else caught his attention. From the doorway, Arjun froze. Out on the garden pathway, his son Ariv was struggling to cross a puddle. His small crutches slipped against the wet surface again and again. The challenge was enormous for such a little body, but Ariv refused to give up. And then, Arjun saw her, a young woman, dressed in a simple red maid's uniform with a white apron, knelt on the ground. Without hesitation, she spread a rug across the puddle, her only thought written plainly across her face. Let the child pass safely. Let him smile. Ariv carefully stepped onto the rug, moved across, and the moment his feet landed safely, he laughed. A soft, victorious laugh only children could make. The woman's face lit up too, her joy completely selfless, as though his triumph was hers. Arjun stood at a distance, stunned. His hands instinctively rose to his head in disbelief. He had seen people obey him out of fear, respect, or money. But this was different. There was no selfish motive, no hidden agenda, just pure care. For the first time in years, something stirred inside his chest. He whispered to himself, "Who is she? Just a maid? Or something much more?" He didn't step forward yet. He only watched, silently, as the scene unfolded before his eyes. The son he rarely had time for, and a woman who cared for him as if he were her own. And that was the moment everything in Arjun's life quietly began to change. Arjun stepped forward slowly, his polished shoes crunching lightly on the gravel path. Ariv looked up at the sound, his little face lighting up with surprise. "Papa, you're home early," he exclaimed, his voice filled with delight. Arjun's stern features softened for a moment. He bent down to embrace his son, holding him tightly. How long had it been since I saw this kind of smile on his face? He thought. When Arjun finally lifted his eyes, they met the woman's. She quickly stood, lowering her gaze respectfully, her hands brushing against her apron nervously. She hadn't expected the master of the house to appear so suddenly. "Good evening, sir," she said quietly. Her voice carried no arrogance, no fear, only humility. Arjun studied her closely. She looked simple, almost too ordinary for the grand mansion that surrounded them. But there was something in her eyes, something unshakably kind. "You helped my son," Arjun said, his tone more curious than grateful. "Why?" The question startled her. Most people in her position would have bowed, apologized, or said something rehearsed. But she looked at him directly this time, her expression steady. "Because he needed help," she replied. "Children shouldn't struggle when someone can make it easier for them." Her words, so simple yet so powerful, struck Arjun unexpectedly. He raised an eyebrow. "Do you always involve yourself like this? Even when it isn't part of your duties?" She hesitated for a moment, then answered, "I don't think kindness should be limited to duties. If I see someone in need, I do what I can. That's how I was raised. Arjun fell silent, observing her carefully. Most employees in his house were eager to please him, eager to gain favor, but this young woman, she spoke with sincerity, not strategy. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Anjali," she replied softly. Anjali. The name stayed in his mind longer than he expected. Arjun wanted to test her further. He had met countless people who wore masks, smiling in front of him but hiding selfish motives behind their politeness. Something about Anjali told him she was different, but he needed to know for sure. "You've been working here for how long?" he asked. "Only a few months, sir," she answered. "I usually help in the kitchen, sometimes with laundry. But Ariv, he reminds me of my younger brother. I suppose that's why She trailed off, lowering her gaze again. Arjun almost smiled at that. She had revealed a piece of her heart without realizing it. He muttered, straightening up. "Very well. Continue your work." Anjali bowed her head politely and turned to leave, but Arjun's mind was far from settled. That night, as he sat in his study, surrounded by business reports and files, he found himself unable to concentrate. His pen tapped idly against the desk as the image of Anjali kneeling on the ground, helping Ariv, replayed in his mind. Was it just an act of duty? Or was it something more? For the first time in years, Arjun Mehra, the man who trusted no one, felt curious about another person's character. And somewhere deep inside, he had already decided. He would test her honesty, her intentions, and her strength. Only then would he know who she truly was. The next morning, Arjun woke earlier than usual. For a man who rarely cared about anything outside his empire, it was unusual that his thoughts lingered on a maid. Yet something about Anjali unsettled him. Her honesty, her quiet courage, her tenderness toward Ariv. At breakfast, Arjun pretended to read the newspaper while secretly watching her as she moved through the dining hall. She worked with quiet precision, carrying trays, pouring juice, helping the older staff when needed. There was no laziness, no distraction, no arrogance. Still, Arjun knew appearances could be deceiving. He had seen countless people wear masks to climb the ladder of wealth. He needed to know if Anjali was truly different. That afternoon, he created his first test. While walking down the corridor, he deliberately left his expensive pen, an imported Mont Blanc worth thousands, on a side table. He positioned himself where he could see without being noticed. Minutes later, Anjali came down the hall carrying folded linens. She spotted the pen. For a moment, she paused. Arjun leaned forward slightly, watching. Would she pocket it? Would temptation show its face? Instead, she placed the linens down carefully, picked up the pen, and walked straight to the butler. "Sir, someone left this behind," she said. "It looks valuable. Please return it to the master." Arjun exhaled slowly, leaning back. His lips curved slightly, not into a full smile, but into something close. Interesting, he thought. But one test wasn't enough. The following day, he arranged for one of his managers to visit the house under the guise of maintenance work. The man accidentally dropped a sealed envelope containing cash near the kitchen. Later, Arjun received a message. The envelope had been handed in untouched by Anjali. That evening, Arjun observed her in the garden with Ariv. She was kneeling again, helping him adjust his crutches. The boy laughed freely in her company, more than he ever did with anyone else. "You'll get stronger each day," Anjali encouraged gently. "Don't rush, just one step at a time." Ariv nodded, his eyes sparkling with trust. Arjun stood hidden behind a tall pillar, his heart stirring in ways it hadn't for years. He was used to loyalty bought by money, but this This loyalty came from the heart. Still, Arjun wasn't satisfied. To trust someone fully, especially enough to let them close to his personal world, required more. He needed to know if she was truly unshakable. That night, he sat in his study, looking at Ariv's framed photograph. If she truly is as honest as she seems, maybe she's the person I've been waiting for. Not just for me, but for my son. And with that thought, Arjun began to plan more tests. Ones that would challenge not just Anjali's honesty, but her compassion, her strength, and her determination. Because if she passed, he already knew his life would never be the same again. A week later, Arjun summoned Anjali to his study. The room was imposing, lined with bookshelves, awards, and a massive oak desk that seemed to swallow the space. Anjali entered nervously, her hands clasped before her apron. "You asked for me, sir?" Arjun leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with those sharp, unreadable eyes. "Yes, I've been observing you." Her heart skipped. Had she done something wrong? But Arjun's voice was calm, measured. "You've shown qualities I don't see often: honesty, discipline, and genuine care for others. Tell me, Anjali, do you wish to keep serving in this house all your life? Or do you dream of something more?" The question stunned her. Dreams? She hadn't dared to think beyond survival. I don't know, sir," she admitted. "I only wish to earn an honest living and support my family. But if there was a chance to do more, to help others like me, I would take it." Arjun's lips curved slightly. This was the answer he had hoped for. "I'm offering you a position in my company," he said simply. Anjali's eyes widened. "In your company? But I'm not educated like your managers, sir. I don't have experience in big offices." "Experience can be gained," Arjun replied, "but character cannot be taught. And character, Miss Anjali, is what I need." Her chest tightened with emotion. She bowed deeply. "Thank you, sir. Promise, I won't let you down." Thrown into a new world. On her first day at Mera Enterprises, Anjali felt as though she had stepped into another universe. Glass towers, polished floors, men and women in crisp suits moving with confidence and urgency. She stood among them in a simple cotton sari Arjun had provided, feeling out of place. But Arjun's instructions were clear. She would work in the Human Resources Department not as a manager but as an assistant who would learn the ropes and, most importantly, sit in on recruitment interviews. Anjali quickly noticed a pattern. Most candidates who came were from wealthy families or had connections inside the company. Poorer applicants were often brushed aside before they even sat down. One afternoon, as she watched a young man in a worn-out shirt being dismissed without consideration, she couldn't stay silent. "Excuse me," she said softly but firmly. "Shouldn't we at least test his skills before making a decision?" The HR officer frowned. "He doesn't fit our image. We don't have time." But Anjali persisted. "Talent doesn't have an image, sir. Only ability." Reluctantly, they allowed the young man to demonstrate his computer skills. To everyone's surprise, he completed the tasks faster than half the polished candidates before him. Arjun, who had been observing from the glass window of his private office, saw everything. A faint smile touched his lips. Within weeks, Anjali began to earn a reputation. She encouraged the company to give chances to poor but skilled applicants. She listened to the stories of single mothers, struggling students, and hardworking villagers who only wanted a fair opportunity. Her recommendations led to hiring some of the most dedicated workers the company had ever seen. The results were undeniable. Productivity soared. Departments once plagued with laziness began to thrive, as the newly hired poor workers treated every paycheck like a blessing. Whispers in the halls. But not everyone was pleased. Some senior managers, threatened by this new wave of change, whispered among themselves, "She's just a maid. What does she know of running a corporation? She's making the place look cheap, bringing in villagers and poor people." Yet Arjun remained silent. He wanted to see how far Anjali would go when faced with resistance. And Anjali? She never wavered. Whenever challenged, she said the same thing: "Give people a chance. Let merit decide." Her calm conviction began to win over even the most skeptical colleagues. One evening, after everyone left, Arjun called her into his office. "You've caused quite a stir in my company," he said. Anjali lowered her gaze nervously. "If I've overstepped, sir, I'm sorry. I only thought." "You thought correctly," Arjun interrupted. He stood, walked over to the window, and looked at the city lights. "For years, this company has been run on status and influence. You've reminded me of something I forgot long ago, that real growth comes from hard work, not privilege." He turned to face her, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "You've done well, Anjali. Very well." Her eyes shone with pride. In that moment, she wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who had begun to change an empire. The company was flourishing. Departments once stagnant now buzzed with new energy. Projects were being completed faster, profits climbing higher. Word spread that Mera Enterprises was reinventing itself thanks, in part, to the mysterious new assistant in HR. But for Arjun, success wasn't enough. He had trusted people before, managers, advisors, even friends, only to be betrayed when greed took over. He needed proof that Anjali's honesty wasn't just a performance. So he began his ultimate test, the offer. One evening, he called Anjali into his office. Papers were stacked on his desk, but he pushed them aside and slid a sleek black envelope toward her. "Inside is a contract," Arjun said evenly. "If you sign it, I'll make you head of HR. A huge salary, benefits, even a company car." Anjali froze. Her hands trembled as she touched the envelope. "A promotion? This quickly?" Arjun continued, his eyes sharp. "But there's one condition. From now on, you'll prioritize candidates I recommend. Whether they're skilled or not, they'll be hired. Connections over merit. Do this, and your future is secure." The room went silent. Arjun's heart pounded. This was the moment. Would she take the bait like everyone else? Anjali slowly lifted her eyes. Her voice was steady, though quiet. "Sir, I cannot sign this." Arjun's expression darkened. "Do you understand what you're refusing? This could change your life. Your family's life." She took a breath. "If I agree, sir, then all the trust you placed in me will mean nothing. I cannot betray the people who come here hoping for a fair chance. My life is not worth more than their dignity." For a long moment, Arjun just stared at her. A storm raged behind his calm eyes. Then, without a word, he took the envelope back, tore it neatly in half, and dropped it into the trash bin. Inside, though, his heart whispered, "She passed." The temptation of money. But he wasn't done. A few days later, he arranged another test. Anjali was working late when a courier delivered a small bag to her desk. Inside was a thick bundle of cash, marked as an urgent client expense. The note instructed her to handle it personally. Anjali stared at it for a long moment. Then she stood, locked the office drawer, and walked straight to Arjun's secretary. "This doesn't belong to me," she said firmly. "Please hand it to Mr. Mehra directly." Arjun received the money later that night. As he counted the bills, a rare smile touched his lips. The pressure of influence. The third test was even tougher. One of Arjun's wealthy business associates demanded that his unqualified nephew be hired immediately. He approached Anjali directly, offering her a generous gift to speed speed up the process. Anjali's eyes hardened. I'm sorry, she said politely, but in this company, I only forward candidates on merit. If your nephew has the skills, he'll pass like anyone else. If not, I cannot help. The associate scoffed, muttered something insulting, and stormed away. When Arjun heard of it, he felt something inside him shift. Pride, respect, and something else he hadn't felt in years, admiration. The revelation. Late that night, Arjun called her into his private study again. I tested you, he admitted, his voice low. With money, with power, with pressure. And every time you chose honesty. Do you realize how rare that is? Anjali shook her head slightly. Sir, I didn't know you were testing me. I only did what felt right. And that, Arjun said softly, is exactly why you passed. Their eyes met in the quiet of that grand room. For the first time, Arjun allowed his guarded expression to soften. There was no longer just suspicion in his gaze. There was trust. And beneath that trust, something even deeper. This woman, he thought, is not only changing my company. She's changing me. Arjun stood at the balcony of his mansion, the morning sun rising over the horizon. The house was no longer silent, no longer cold. For the first time in years, it felt alive. Anjali's laughter echoed from the kitchen as she prepared breakfast. The warmth of her voice mixed with the playful giggles of the children who had grown to adore her. Arjun closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This was what he had been missing all along. Not the endless parties, not the meaningless business meetings, not the hollow applause from the world, but the simple joy of being loved and giving love back. He remembered the night he had walked into his home earlier than expected and seen Anjali on the floor, in her red dress, comforting his daughter as though she were her own. At that moment, something had shifted inside him. What began as disbelief had turned into a bond stronger than anything he had ever known. Now, months later, he was no longer the lonely millionaire. He was a man with a family, with purpose, with love. Anjali walked out onto the balcony, carrying a tray with 2 cups of tea. She smiled, her red dress flowing softly in the breeze. Lost in thought again? She teased. Arjun smiled back, taking the cup from her hand. Just thinking how lucky I was to come home early that day. If I hadn't, I might have missed my entire life. Anjali's eyes softened as she looked at him. You didn't just come home early, Arjun. You came home to yourself. He reached for her hand and held it tightly, vowing silently never to let go. And as the children ran out to join them, the mansion filled with laughter, light, and love. The kind of wealth no amount of money could ever buy. For the first time, Arjun truly understood. The greatest fortune was not in his bank account, but in his heart. Sparkle's end of story.